In a franchise already littered with reboots, it was the next reboot on the road to the next reboot. A brand desperate to figure out which kind of war kids were willing to engage with for entertainment purposes. More cartoonish, more robots, more CG, more anime. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of G.I. Joe Sigma 6. G.I. Joe Sigma 6 is an animated series that ran 21 episodes over 2 seasons from fall of 2005 to fall of 2006 before being canceled with 5 remaining episodes unaired. The series and the accompanying toy line were the latest attempt to reskin war as entertainment for kids, despite so many failed attempts in a marketplace where so many others were doing it so well. The story of G.I. Joe Sigma 6 is already in progress when we join them. A remote observation outpost in the North Pole picks up a heat signature that turns out to be an army of robots bearing the logo of the evil organization known as Cobra. When the signal from the outpost is lost, the G.I. Joe team is dispatched to find out what happened and who's responsible. It's obviously Cobra, but it's not Cobra Commander because he's been in a jail cell since they captured him last month. G.I. Joe leader Duke and second-in-command Scarlet head to the site in their Ice Saber Polar Patrol vehicles, while a squad of ninjas led by Snake Eyes infiltrates the area on foot. But this is only one of the sites being attacked by Cobra because this operation is being coordinated by Destro and his on-again, off-again partner Baroness. The Joe's base camp in Arizona is attacked. The Ninja Squad is surrounded by Storm Shadow and an army of ninja bats. Duke is lured into the Cobra base, which turns out to be a secret rocket launching him into the sky with a detonation timer counting down. Cobra's got the drop on the Joes. Can Duke's off the record, highly trained combat special mission force accomplish its only objective, stop Cobra? Who could possibly win with so few soldiers against a massive robot army? Even though the numbers don't add up, the answer is Sigma 6. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. What's the first thing that pops into your head when I say the 1980s or the 1990s? Don't think about it, just say it. 1, 2, 3, Rubik's Cube. Yes, they have that, or they had that, or they will have that. 80stees.com is constantly refreshing their inventory with officially licensed t-shirts featuring characters, quotes, and logos from cartoons, comics, TV shows, movies, wrestling, and music from the 1970s through the 2000s. So while I can't guarantee that everything you can think of will be in stock, I can guarantee that you'll always be surprised by the range of their selection. 80stees.com has something for everyone. Your favorite heroes like Batman, Spider-Man, Mega Man, Deadpool, and Wolverine, Voltron, both Lion and Vehicle, Star Wars, Stargate, old and older Battlestar Galactica, Motley Crue, Biz Markie, Pink Floyd, and Jimi Hendrix. Find the shirt that's right for you, the one that speaks to your interests, and lets the world know that there's no bigger fan of scratch and sniff stickers, spam, or Kellogg's Fruit Loops than you. And you can prove it because you're wearing the shirt. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. And thanks again to 80stees.com. G.I. Joe was created all the way back in 1963, and since then, reboots have been a regular part of its history. Let's get up to speed on each of these milestones real quick. G.I. Joe, the 12-inch army soldier toy that Hasbro coined the term action figure to promote to surly cigarette-smoking 8-year-olds in 1964, was rebooted for the first time in 1970 as Adventure Team. In the heart of the Vietnam era, the goal was to take the focus off war and put it on adventure, kind of like those pulpy magazine covers of the 40s and 50s. Reboot number 2, Super Joe, came in 1977 as G.I. Joe became a spacefaring superhero. Super Joe had a light built into his chest so he and his superhero friends could take the laser fight to the evil King Gore and the Terran invaders in the far-off future. In 1982, Hasbro, inspired by the success of Kenner's Star Wars action figure line, went back to the drawing board to reboot G.I. Joe for a third time around the idea of Little Green Army Men. The result was a full line of 3 3/4-inch vehicles, playsets, and action figures called G.I. Joe, a real American hero. They also took advantage of the Reagan administration's relaxed children's television advertising regulations to ride the wave of media saturation marketing. Kids were bombarded from all sides with comics, toys, cartoons, games, socks, underwear, soap dispensers, toothbrushes, and we loved it for 12 years, despite the fact that the real American hero established the characters and themes that drove the foundation of the franchise for decades to come. Those kids grew up and moved on. Sort of. On the outside. We'll come back to that. In 1994, Hasbro rolled out reboot number 4, Sergeant Savage and his Screaming Eagles, a full reboot with all new characters, including the new leader, Sergeant Savage, America's surliest, grisliest son of a bitch that ever punched a Nazi from the greatest generation of war, unfrozen in the present to take on General Blitz and his Iron Army. That was wiped off the board by reboot number 5 just a year later in 1995. Hasbro brought the Joes back as a jacked-up, muscly 90s version called G.I. Joe Extreme, featuring a new Joe team led by Lieutenant Stone and set 10 years in the future of 2006. The toy line and cartoon lasted into 1997 before the whole brand went on leave. In 2002, Hasbro was back with reboot number 6, G.I. Joe vs. Cobra, motivated by the popularity of the Devil's Due series of comics that revived and refreshed the characters and themes of the real American hero era. It turns out that the fans of the 80s did grow up and move on, just not very far and not for very long. No shit! In 2003, the Spy Troop sub-branding was added to indicate the next chapter of the franchise. A direct-to-video CG animated film was released to help build out the mythology, and in 2004, the final chapter of the series, G.I. Joe Valor vs. Venom, was released, accompanied by another direct-to-video CG animated film. Since the 1980s, a media component was one of the prime drivers of sales for G.I. Joe product, specifically cartoons and comic books. As a result, the 80s versions of the characters are the versions that are most closely associated with the brand. 2002 through 2004's G.I. Joe vs. Cobra was a return to many of those 80s characters and concepts after a decade of trying to get away from them. The two direct-to-video animated films didn't have quite the same impact as the daily 80s cartoon, but hey, it was something. When Hasbro rebooted the brand in 2005 as Sigma 6, they continued to invest in the world building established in those G.I. Joe vs. Cobra direct-to-video films, despite the rest of the brand being different in nearly every other way. When Sigma 6 kicks off, Cobra Commander has been captured, Hawk is recovering from his injuries, Snake Eyes has Kamakura and Jinx as his apprentices, the Joes are activated as soon as a new conflict arises. But they look different, they sound different, the play pattern is different, the entire concept of the way the battle plays out, figuratively and narratively, is designed to connect with the next new generation discovering the brand for the first time. A generation of kids that have been heavily into anime since 1998 thanks to shows like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Ronin Warriors, Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and a lot of others. Become a YouTube channel member today for $1 a month to get access to an exclusive monthly video. For April 2024, that exclusive video is the history of Youngblood, so click the join button below this video or click the link in the description to become a YouTube channel member today.
G.I. Joe Dragonhawk on the attack. Drop deploying now! The team's in trouble. Will Sigma 6 defeat Cobra? You can find out at GIJoe.com. Dragonhawk comes as shown. Batteries not included. Ask a parent before going online.
By 2005, Hasbro's Transformers were already several years into their own anime phase. Beginning in 2000, the Transformers Robots in Disguise animated series was originally created by a Japanese animation studio for Japanese television. It was adapted for the US market after the fact. Can't get more anime than that. For the next 3 years, Transformers Armada, Energon, and Cybertron continued that anime visual style and continued to integrate computer-generated images into the visual language of the show to a welcome degree of success, something that Hasbro was excited to bring to G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe. I had to get it in somewhere. As a brand built around war in a post-9/11 world, Hasbro tread lightly around the idea of terrorists and intentionally pushed G.I. Joe in an even more science fiction direction than it had previously been. More robots, more emphasis on the battle of good versus evil than America versus terrorism. G.I. Joe Sigma 6 was produced by 4Kids Productions, the company that helped bring you shows like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003, and WMAC Masters. It was animated by Gonzo, a Japanese animation studio founded by some former members of Gainax. Gainax was the Japanese production studio that brought you shows like Evangelion, Appleseed, and Gunbuster. Gonzo worked on a whole bunch of anime series, the video for Linkin Park's Breaking the Habit, and parts of the game Suikoden 3. Suikoden 3. Suikoden 3. Suikoden.
Did somebody mention Suikoden? My God.
Sigma 6's cast included Gregory Abbey as Duke, the voice of Ash Ketchum on Pokemon, Veronica Taylor as Scarlet, Duke Devlin on Yu-Gi-Oh!, Duel Masters, Mark Thompson played Cobra Commander. The name Sigma 6 refers to the special suits worn by the G.I. Joe team and was likely inspired by the real-life U.S. Special Ops unit, SEAL Team 6. Created in the story by the G.I. Joe character High Tech, they not only enhance the wearer's natural strength, speed, and agility, but they also act as a force field capable of deflecting lasers. There are a series of ports on the suit designed to interact with various modular weapons and tactical gear, which was a key component in the toy line. The ability to swap weapons around on the ports, harkening back to the Centurions toys of the 80s, which were created by Kenner, who Hasbro acquired in 1991. Hasbro, till all are one. Sigma 6 figures were an aesthetic shock to longtime fans of G.I. Joe. At 8 inches tall, Sigma 6 figures weren't quite as large as the original 12-inch figures from the 60s, but nearly double the size of the traditional 3 3/4-inch figures the brand was known for. The animated series may have carried on the mythology of the previous era, but there was no integrating the new line of toys with any of the previous eras. Wave 1 featured main characters like Duke, Snake Eyes, Tunnel Rat, Heavy Duty, Kamakura, and Spirit Iron Knife. Cobra was represented by Storm Shadow and a Ninja Bat. Additional waves rolled in Cobra Commander, Destro, Zartan, Firefly, Long Range, Lieutenant Stone, but no Scarlet. Or Jinx, or Baroness. Sorry ladies, action figures are made for boys and only feature boys. Despite their role as essential main characters in the series, none of the women on G.I. Joe or Cobra made it to toy shelves as part of the core 8-inch line of figures. Some of them did make it into the non-posable 2.5-inch mission scale figures that were sold in multi-packs themed around specific adventures. Both lines featured vehicles and additional accessories like helicopters, motorcycles, battle mechs, and even the return of hang gliders. Devil's Due Entertainment continued to produce G.I. Joe comics. That said, their Sigma 6 series was a much shorter run than their other G.I. Joe offerings. G.I. Joe Sigma 6 was a 6-issue limited series where each issue focused on a specific member of the Sigma 6 team facing off against a specific member of Cobra. None of those stories had anything to do with the other ongoing G.I. Joe comics that Devil's Due was publishing to address that still fervent fan base that was interested in the traditional versions of those characters. Fans who were still hungry for the 80s era costumes, relationships, and conflicts. Updated, yes, but not too much. 21 episodes over 2 seasons ran from fall of 2005 through fall of 2006. Unfortunately, Sigma 6 never found the new audience they were hoping to connect with. Weak toy sales and ratings combined to cut the series short before every episode was broadcast. The last 5 episodes of season 2 didn't air until 2007, and that was on YTV up north in America's Hat. That said, the first 5 episodes were edited into a movie called First Strike, which was released on DVD in 2006. Other single-episode DVDs were bundled together with figure 2-packs that were available at Walmart and Toys R Us, but we live here in the future. So good news, you can watch the entire thing, including the last 5 episodes on Tubi TV and here on YouTube. Sigma 6 was an attempt to reinvent the franchise for a new generation of kids with no attachment to the original series, which was at that time over 40 years old, or its more successful 1982 reboot, which was nearly 25 years old. Branding reflected that desire to move away from every previous incarnation of the brand by featuring the Sigma 6 more substantially on the packaging than the G.I. Joe in an attempt to will it to be something else. Some rebroadcasts of the series went so far as to drop the G.I. Joe name altogether so as not to confuse it with other canon media. It's possible that Sigma 6 might have had a better chance if it had just been something else. Totally independent of G.I. Joe, succeeding or failing on its own, free to go wherever it needed to, unburdened by even a half-hearted attempt to please legacy fans. Change is necessary for any brand to stay healthy over time, but if I've learned one thing from doing this show, it's that the kids of the 80s are notoriously afraid of change. That includes during the 80s when the line tried to pivot to space or environmentalism, the war on drugs, or dinosaur capturing. It's a complicating factor unique to legacy brands like Transformers, G.I. Joe, Ninja Turtles, and Ghostbusters. How do you retain the audience that helped get it off the ground while keeping it fresh and relevant to today's kids who will sustain it into the future? Some brands have resolved that the only way forward is to cater to both at the same time with different merchandise and media while spinning into a multiverse when there are no other safe creative options left on the table. As of this video, Sigma 6 is its own canon, independent of every other iteration of G.I. Joe, a little pocket universe like so many of the reboots that came before it and a few that have occurred since. A reminder that every day that goes by, we're only a reboot away from the next reboot. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Several different tiers to address your specific Secret Galaxy content needs. We have a new Secret Galaxy merch shop. Check that out at secretgalaxy.shop. All merchandise is physically in stock and ready to ship. Links to all of this in the description below. And let us know in the comments down below if you were a fan of Sigma 6. I didn't watch the show back in the day. I don't even think I knew there was a show at all, but I liked the figures despite them being a little expensive. I would love to see Hasbro roll some of the character designs like Lieutenant Stone into classified, similar to the way that Star Wars Team has incorporated more realistic versions of animated characters into the Black Series. If not, no big loss. I still have everything I could possibly want from the 80s, and it's never going away. Ever. Oh man, that's your sad laugh.